Hello, and welcome to Your Language Coach. I'm your host, Coach, and I'm so excited to have you join us today. Whether you're just starting your English learning journey or you're working on perfecting your skills, this podcast is here to help you build confidence and make progress. Today's episode is about one of my favorite topics, learning English through podcast conversations. Podcasts are such a powerful tool for improving your listening, vocabulary, and even speaking skills. But I'm not here alone. I have a special guest with me today, Patricia, a passionate language learner who's used podcasts to take her English to the next level.
Hi, Coach. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be here to share my experience. Podcasts were a game changer for me, and I hope our listeners can take away some helpful tips from this conversation.
We're so glad to have you, Patricia. Your story is going to inspire so many people, especially those who might feel stuck or overwhelmed in their English learning.
I hope so. I know firsthand how challenging it can be to learn a new language, but the right tools like podcasts can make all the difference.
Exactly. And for our listeners, by the end of this episode, you'll have practical strategies to use podcasts effectively as part of your language learning routine. So grab your headphones or turn up the volume in your car, and let's dive in. Patricia, let's start with the basics. Why do you think podcasts are such a powerful tool for learning English?
There are so many reasons. First, podcasts offer authentic, real-life conversations. They're not like textbooks or language apps that teach overly formal or robotic phrases. Podcasts show you how people actually speak in everyday situations.
That's such a good point. When you learn with podcasts, you're exposed to the kind of English you'll hear in the real world, slang, idioms, and even cultural references.
Exactly. And another reason is the flexibility of podcasts. You can listen to them anywhere while cooking, commuting, or even exercising. Such an easy way to fit language practice into your daily life.
That's so true. Podcasts let you learn on your own schedule, and it doesn't feel like work.
Yes. And the third thing I love about podcasts is the variety. You can find a podcast on literally any topic: sports, travel, science, even true crime. So, you're not just learning English, you're also learning about topics that interest you.
I love that. It keeps the learning process fun and engaging. Did you find that listening to different podcasts helped with your exposure to accents?
Oh, absolutely. At first, I struggled with British and Australian accents because I wasn't used to them. But listening to podcasts helped me get comfortable with those differences. Now, I feel much more confident when I meet someone with an accent I don't hear often.
That's amazing. It's such an important skill, especially if you're planning to travel or work in a global environment.
Definitely. Plus, podcasts teach you about cultural nuances. For example, I learned that Mayor amazing.
Absolutely. Podcasts give you that cultural context that's hard to get from a textbook. Patricia, as a Hispanic English learner, did you face any unique challenges when you first started using podcasts?
Oh yes, one of the biggest challenges was understanding fast speech. Native speakers talk so quickly, and at first, it felt impossible to keep up. The Saul say awesome, while Brits might say brilliant. Little things like that make a big difference when you're trying to sound natural.
That's a common struggle for many learners.
I started with podcasts designed for English learners. They speak slower and explain difficult words. Then when I felt ready, I switched to podcasts for native speakers. I also used the playback speed feature to slow down the audio at first. It helped a lot.
How did you work through it? That's such a great strategy. Did you have any trouble with vocabulary?
Oh, definitely. Sometimes I'd hear words or expressions I didn't understand. At first, I'd stop the episode every time I heard a new word. But that got frustrating. So I started keeping a notebook. I'd write down new words and look them up later.
That's a great idea. I always tell students to focus on context first. Try to guess the meaning of a word before checking a dictionary. It trains your brain to think in English.
Exactly. Another challenge was pronunciation. Some sounds in English, like the 𝗖𝗁 and think and this, were really hard for me. Listening to podcasts helped me hear those sounds more clearly and practice them.
That's fantastic. How did you practice those tricky sounds?
I used the shadowing technique. I'd pause the podcast, repeat what the speaker said, and try to match their pronunciation. It felt awkward at first, but it worked.
That's such a powerful technique. Did you feel self-conscious at first?
Oh, definitely. But I realized that making mistakes is part of the process. Now I feel much more confident speaking English, even in professional settings.
Now that we've talked about the benefits of podcasts and some of the challenges, let's get practical. Patricia, what are your top tips for someone who wants to use podcasts to learn English?
I have a ton of tips. The first one is to choose the right podcast. This depends on your level of English. If you're a beginner, start with podcasts designed for learners. These often have slower speech and explanations of vocabulary.
That's a great tip. For more advanced learners, would you recommend moving on to podcasts for native speakers?
Yes, definitely. Once you're comfortable, switch to topics you enjoy, like travel, food, or technology. It makes the learning process more engaging.
Many podcasts offer transcripts that you can read along with as you listen. This helps you connect the spoken and written forms of words, and it's a great way to improve your spelling. I love that. It's also a great way to identify words you might not understand when they're spoken quickly. What's your next tip?
Use transcripts whenever possible. Many podcasts offer transcripts that you can read along with as you listen. This helps you connect the spoken and written forms of words, and it's a great way to improve your spelling.
Practice active listening. Don't just play the podcast in the background.
Really focus on what's being said. Pause when you hear new words or interesting phrases and write them down.
If possible, write in English. It forces you to think in the language,
which helps you internalize it faster. But if you're struggling with a word's meaning, it's okay to write a quick translation.
which helps you internalize it faster.
Try the shadowing technique. This is one of my favorites. You pause the podcast and repeat what the speaker says, mimicking their tone, rhythm, and pronunciation. It's like having a mini speaking lesson. Absolutely. When you practice shadowing, you start to feel more comfortable speaking English. You're training your mouth to produce the sounds naturally, which builds confidence for real-life conversations.
Dialogue, and you and our audience can repeat after me. Ready?
Ready?
Here's the dialogue.
Excuse me. Do you know where the nearest bus stop is? Yes, it's just around the corner. You'll see it on the left.
Excuse me, do you know where the nearest bus stop is? Yes, it's just around the corner. You'll see it on the left. Let's do the first line. Excuse me, do you know where the nearest bus stop is? Great. Now the second line. Yes, it's just around the corner. You'll see it on the left. Fantastic. For our listeners, you can replay this section and practice shadowing until it feels natural.